Hey, welcome to Father Games. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Ark Nova. If you need to learn the rules to the game, I have a how to play video which I'll link in this video's description. This is just going to be a quick review, 3 negatives, 3 positives, and then my final score out of 10 at the end. So starting off with negatives today, my first negative is actually the length of the game. So what do I mean by that? Well, on the back of the box it says the game is anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. I think that's a pretty conservative estimation. Most of the games I've played have been upwards of 2.5 to 3 hours for a 2-player game. And more than that, obviously, for a 3 or 4 player game. So it's definitely, you're in for a long game, which on its own isn't a very big deal. So some of my favorite games are actually longer than this. And it's not the length of the game that's the issue. Like, my favorite game is War of the Ring. And that, if you know the game, you know that's a really long game. Cloud Spire is another one of my favorites. It's I've had 3-player games be 5 hours or over 5 hours. And they've all been enjoyable experiences. The reason I think the difference between that and this, why the length of those games is okay, where this one can feel a bit long, is kind of twofold. So first, the lack of tension throughout the game. So in War of the Ring, for example, there's always this ongoing tension of, is the other player going to get past your forces and, win by getting the most points, or is the Fellowship going to be corrupted at any point throughout the game, or can, the Fellowship's creeping down to the end of the, to Mordor to throw the ring in the fires of Mordor. There's always this ongoing tension, like the game could end at any point or relatively soon at any point in the game. And then there's all this ongoing tension throughout. Cloud Spire, same kind of thing. It can be a really long game. It could be a full 4 rounds, but it could also end at any point if one person gets past your minions and heroes and gets to your wall and destroys it. So there's this ongoing tension in both of those games. Despite them being longer, they don't feel as long because you're always kind of on the edge of your seat kind of thing, waiting to see how the game ends. In Ark Nova, it starts off so slow, so it's like a slow grind to get going, and as you're building the buildings on your map, you have small, less significant animals that you're going to play at the start because that's all you can kind of afford. So the game really starts off slow from there. So the starting off the game can really feel like a bit of a grind, but you see where the game is going to end. Like once your conservation counter and your appeal counter, once someone's connect, then everyone gets another round. So you can see it in front of you. Kind of relatively when the game is going to end. So that can make it feel a bit longer if you're slowly just progressing up the track, a few points at a time or whatever. It can feel a bit long. But the issue I have with the length is if one person pulls out ahead and gets a commanding lead over you or the other opponents, then they're most likely they're going to win at that point because every break they're going to get more coins. They've probably upgraded their cards more because they're further up the track to get those unlocks, so they're going to be getting the ability to play. They're going to have the ability to play more cards or better cards or do multiple actions on their animals' turns if they've upgraded the animals' cards. Whatever the case, if someone takes a commanding lead, they probably, at least the games I've seen, they're usually going to win the game. And then you still have to continue to the end, another hour and a half, whatever it is, to realize that you were going to lose anyway. So there's no way to really stop who's in the lead if they have a commanding lead. So the tension's kind of lost there. But if players are, close to each other and score kind of throughout the game, when the game ramps up, then the tension is there towards the end of the game, and it really is really well done later in the game if players are close, if their scores are close. But if they're not, then the tension's kind of lost and it can feel like a bit of a grind to the end of the game. So that is my first negative, the length of the game. My second negative is actually kind of tied into that. It's the downtime in between rounds, and that can be as more for higher player counts, and that could potentially be an issue with the people I play with exclusively, or it could be something other people have as well, an issue other people have as well. So the issue with that is, in most games you can kind of play a new strategy in between turns, so then when your turn comes around, then you already know what you're going to do, and then it can kind of keep the game flowing. The issue with this is if the cards change, the face-up cards in the display change in between rounds, then you might see something that's up on your turn that could change the strategy of what you were planning on doing on your turn. So then you wait till your turn starts to kind of play on your strategy if there's different cards up there. So if players are planning their strategy at the start of their turn, it can add to the length of the game as well. And there's so many things you can do, which is a good thing, but if people have to analyze every possible outcome and plan their strategy, like optimize the most they can, then it can definitely make for a long time in between turns. And if their turns link off other turns, or they're doing multiple things throughout the game, especially later on in the game, then it can really feel like there can be a lot of downtime in between. And that's mainly an issue with higher player counts, and that might only be an issue with people I play with, but that is a negative that I at least found playing through this. And my third negative is something that people might not agree with me on, but I personally found the look of the cards to be really, really boring, especially the sponsors cards. Like, for instance, these people, they might be really fun, exciting people in real life, I'm sure they are, but they look really boring on a card. Or you have ones with just doors and buildings like these ones. Or this one, just a pad of paper and a pen. I don't even know what's going on there. That's not very exciting at all. This one here, half the kids don't even look excited in this one. They look bored and they don't even want to be on the card. So I feel like it was a missed opportunity with the cards. Primarily the sponsors cards. I just found them to be really just kind of boring. It felt like I was looking at a science project on a lot of the cards, and I always hated science in school. But speaking of the cards, let's move on to positives. My first positive is actually the amount of cards and how they all feel so different. So there's 212 zoo cards in the game, and the zoo cards are broken up into 3 types. You have conservation cards, you have animals cards, and you have these boring sponsors cards that I mentioned earlier. So of these 212 cards are all in a face-down deck at the end of the board, and if you draw, you're going to be drawing from there or from the face-up display and then replenishing it afterwards. And so because all the cards are mixed into the same deck, all the different types of cards, you really don't know what card you're going to get. So you really can change your strategy based on what you get. There's so many different things you can do with the cards. But even the animals cards, they all... there's so many animals cards and they all feel so different. Like, there is some repeats on the abilities, but the animals themselves will be different. So they're going to have different habitats or different building requirements or whatever the case. The cards really do feel different, and there's so many of them. They did a really good job of balancing them all. And the fact that there's sponsors and conservation cards mixed in there, that really changes what you get. I really thought they did a really, really good job with the overall cards, and especially for having so many in the game. My next positive is the scoring. Actually, I thought that was a really cool approach. So when I first read it in the rulebook, basically how it works is when your conservation counter and your appeal counter, when they connect, everyone's going to get one more turn and then the game's going to end. When I first read that in the rulebook, I thought that was ridiculous. I was like, that will not work. I had to keep rereading it to make sure I was reading it right. For whatever reason, I just didn't think it would work, and it does. It is did a really good job with that. So, because there's the 2 tracks, you can focus on the conservation track if someone is getting high on the appeal track. If someone does take a commanding lead, they probably still will win, but you can focus on the conservation track to try to get points that way, or whatever the case. There's also the reputation track in the center, which can unlock things along the way. I thought it was really cool how you have these 3 different tracks that work so differently from each other, and that they're ongoing, and there's just it adds to the strategies that you can do throughout the game. And there's so many different things you can do in the game, which I also really like. So, like, if you need to do, if you're the type of person that needs to do absolutely everything you can, you might not like this, because you're never going to upgrade all your 5 cards. The most you can ever do is 4 cards upgrade throughout the game. You're never going to get all 5 partner zoos. You can only get 4 maximum, and depending on how much time's in the game, you might not be able to get all your partner universities, or like whatever the case. You're not going to be able to do everything in the game, and I think that really adds to the strategy, because there's just so many different strategies you can do, and you have to kind of adapt depending on the cards that you pick up to those strategies. But there's so much you can do in this game, and I thought it was really good. The 3 tracks add to the strategy, as I mentioned, but there's just, regardless of those, there's so many different things you can do, so many choices to be made, and I thought it was a really good job done with that. And my third positive is the solo version is absolutely amazing. I was very surprised at that. Not because I didn't think it was a good game. I just thought some games it feels like the solo version is something they kind of just throw in just for the sake of having it. But in this, it felt so well thought out, so well play tested that every negative I had with the game, except for the sponsors cards, which again isn't maybe a huge deal, every negative I had with the game is fixed in the solo version of the game. So there's no downtime, because every time you take an action, you're going to be sliding a cube to the right on this separate board that you have, and then once all the cubes have slid to the right, then a break will happen as normal, and you're going to take the top cube off that board, cover up the the lowest available donation spot on the board, and then you're just going to keep going your next round as normal. And the downtime, there's no downtime. There's very little downtime. because you're not waiting for other players, obviously. And another thing is you start at 20 appeal. It's recommended, so there's less of a slow start because you're going to be getting more coins each break right off the start, as opposed to what you would get in the multiplayer version of the game. And there's the constant tension in in the solo player, because you have just enough turns, it feels like, for you to be able to your two cameras have to connect, and you have to end up with a 0 or positive score at the end of the game to win. So every turn really matters in the solo version, and there's, not that it doesn't in multiplayer, but I feels like there's more leeway with, you can waste a turn or do something that maybe wasn't optimized to the best ability. In single player, you really have to have a good strategy throughout, and you really have to be doing the most you can on each turn, because otherwise you won't win. And so there is that constant tension in single player, and I thought that was really, really well done. But either way, single player is my favorite way to play this game. 2-player is very, very, very good. 3 and 4 is good, but for me, I found it ran a bit long. Some people might not have that issue. I personally felt it was a bit long, but it's still a good game. No matter what player count, it's going to be a good game, and I do highly recommend this game, just more so at the lower player counts.
Father Games rating 8.5.
And that's my thoughts on Ark Nova. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.